everyone, and welcome to National Treasure Hunt, the podcast where the secret lies not only with Charlotte, but also with your co hosts. I'm Aubrey,
And I'm Emily.
and today we are here for our first pop culture comparison of 2026. We are talking about everything that you can possibly think of when it comes to comparing National Treasure to Night at the Museum.
We are, and this film was something.
See, I remember watching this probably in theaters, but certainly near when it came out. And I remember really liking this movie as a kid. I liked it a lot less on this rewatch, but I do want to acknowledge, and I think we said this at the end of our last episode, but people have been asking us to do this comparison for a while. And I think it's similar to like the whole Pirates of the Caribbean thing. Like these movies all came out around the same time and they have some history element to them. So they have the same kind of flavor, if that makes sense. Um, so
It
I'm glad we're
does.
finally getting around to it,
Yeah, I'm really excited for this one, y'all. It's a pop culture episode, so you know what that means. I'm in charge.
which terrifies me greatly.
Hmm.
Um, but before we get into this comparison, we have to start, of course, by acknowledging how National Treasure has crept up into our daily lives lately. These are our screams from Parkington Lane. Okay, Emily, you're up first.
So my scream is actually relevant to some of the stuff we're going to be talking about today, which I'm excited for.
Ooh.
Not only does it involve pop culture, but it also involves Lewis and Clark. And
Oh.
so, mhm, I was rewatching Modern Family recently, as I am wont to do, and
Mhm.
in an episode in season 1, there is a very brief joke about Lewis and Clark. I do not remember what the joke was, but it was a joke about Lewis and Clark, and I remember being like, "I know exactly when I'm gonna use this scream," and so here it is.
Ah, okay, because Sacagawea. Spoiler
Oh,
alert.
yeah.
Okay, got it. Um, my scream is also related to a rewatch this week. I'm specifically using this week because I think my scream last time was about Gilmore Girls. I'm gonna do it again today. When I rewatched during my recent rewatch, Gilmore Girls season 6, episode 15. Emily, this is the Valentine's Day weekend at Martha's Vineyard episode. Do you remember that one?
Ooh, I do.
Yeah, it's I don't like this
It's
episode.
awkward.
It's not great. But I don't know if you ever noticed this. It jumped out at me this time. Do you know that really odd and uncharacteristic scene where Lorelai walks into the kitchen and Rory's there like chopping vegetables for a salad like she's cooking?
Like, she does it all the time casually,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was really honestly, this was my first hit. I was like, "Are we sure this isn't season 7? This does not seem like something that's in character for this person." I digress. There is a giant bowl of lemons on the countertop. Yes.
In their house?
In the Martha's Vineyard house, yeah, like, as she's cooking, there's just this giant bowl of lemons next to her, and I'm like, "Patrick! Patrick, where are you? Are you in one of the guest bedrooms?"
Are you in the refrigerator?
So that's my scream.
That's fantastic. We love some lemons.
It is the it's lemons has become one of those things where I think it's become so niche, yet so obvious to us, when I cannot see a lemon without thinking National Treasure anymore, and I think that's just a me/us thing.
I think it's an us thing and a National Treasure Hunters thing, I venture to say.
Right, but I think a casual National Treasure fan would not think twice,
No,
you
no,
know?
no. They're not thinking about it.
Okay, well, speaking of what the movie National Treasure looks like, in our brief look back today, we are revisiting episode 13, Hunt for Hollywood 2.0. So, as a reminder, everyone, if you are new to our show or if you're looking to revisit some old episodes and you're just like, oh my God, there's so many episodes here, where should I start? We are reminding you what we covered way back in the day. And episode 13 was our behind the scenes look at filming National Treasure 2 Book of Secrets. This was before we had a lot of cast and crew interviews to give us the insider tea. So, this episode, what I remember about it, them was really watching hard all of the deleted scenes and, like, special features that you can find on YouTube.
Yeah, I remember being a little overwhelmed by this episode,
Mm, okay.
um, because I think I was still in the place of not really understanding what had happened in the second National Treasure film.
You have said that in our look back for the last 3 episodes now.
Because they're all about the second National Treasure film, and I was still stressed about it, and I clearly still am.
For me, what stands out is this was the first time I really watched the behind the scenes featurette showing how they choreographed the chase scene in London, like the car
Mm,
chase. And I know you don't like the car chase. Frankly, it's not like my favorite part of the movie either, but I thought that behind the scenes look was fascinating.
yeah. I mean, I will say as car chases go, it's an interesting one.
Because we get to see how they made it happen. And then we got later to talk to the villain characters who drove the cars, like Tim Murphy.
Mhm. I mean, that's not the episode we're giving you a little look back
It's not.
on, but, stick around for a couple more seasons and we'll get there.
Okay, well, send us all your questions and your hot takes about that episode. You can find us online as usual.
Excuse me. You already started. Calm down, please. This is my job. You can find us on both X and Instagram at NT Hunt Podcast. We're also available at nthuntpodcast.com, where you can find information about our books, upcoming events, all that kind of stuff. Please, please, please subscribe to our new National Treasure Hunt YouTube channel. For those of you that are already watching over there, hey, and I hope you're subscribed. And then go ahead and join our Patreon if you are so inclined at patreon.com/nthuntpodcast. We have monthly Patreon exclusive bonus episodes. We got a little book club over there. It's a fun time, y'all.
We are biased, but we are also very objective, I like to think.
Sure. We can tell
Right.
ourselves that.
Okay, Emily, let's dive into this episode. I'm excited. You're excited. I think you're excited to hate talk about this movie. But like you said, you are in charge of this episode. How are things going to break down today?
So I decided that, I mean, well, we have to start with our summary, right?
Sure.
Like,
Hmm.
sure, of the film. Got to tell you what it's about, and that's going to go great, I'm sure. Then I decided to frame this kind of compare and contrast as like, could we make this movie National Treasure? Or like, what would National Treasure look like if it was this movie? Honestly, we're kind of doing the same thing that we normally do, um, but just through a slightly kind of different lens, I guess.
Okay.
We're gonna talk about history. We're gonna talk about characters. We're gonna talk about the structure and the pacing because I have some thoughts. And we're also gonna talk about the like overall kind of broad messaging of the film, like what the film hoped to convey, and then how we think it impacted larger culture, I guess.
All right. I'm down. Um so we have to start with that summary. Please, for the love of haggis, I hope you have prepared a summary that people who have not watched Night at the Museum will be able to understand.
I think so. It's a simple summary. It comes from the Night at the Museum Wikipedia page.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
I will say, not a great summary, but probably better than what I would do.
Oh geez.
It's
Okay.
a
Let's
thing at this point, Aubrey. I can't come with a perfect
uh,
summary.
I know, but I just really guys, if you don't understand what's going on in these comparison episodes, just go watch the movie, I guess, cuz Emily ain't going to help you.
I'll try. So Night at the Museum is interesting, and I wanted to pick this summary for this purpose. It's interestingly described as a fantasy comedy film.
Huh.
Interesting. It's directed by Sean Levy, and, it's actually based on a children's book, which I did not know
I did
before
not know
this.
did not know that either.
1993 children's book. Um, the film stars Ben Stiller, and then, like, a ton of heavy hitters in the
Mhm.
industry. We'll talk about it. And it tells the story of a divorced father who applies for a job as a night watchman,
Mhm.
presumably because he's like about to like lose custody of his child or something. That's kind of what it seems like. So it's like a last ditch effort on his part. And the night watchman job is at New York City's American Museum of Natural History. At this
Mhm.
job, he discovers that the exhibits in the museum come to life at night, animated by a magical Egyptian artifact.
I think that's a great summary. What's wrong with it? That's
It
exactly
was
what
a
happened.
little brief.
Oh, it is brief. I mean, I guess if I were to add anything, I would say that, like, a lot of the characters in this movie end up being exhibits at the museum, right? Because these are, like, statues and figures that come to life, so we start seeing historical figures become characters. For the record, the, like, divorced father, his name is Larry. He is the one played by Ben Stiller. His son is in the movie, that's Nick or Nikki.
Nikki. Mhm.
Um There's a girl who pops in and out, her name is Rebecca, she's sort of a friend slash maybe is she a love interest?
A 100%.
Okay, fine. She's like a docent, like a museum docent, um, and then all the other like I said, we're gonna talk about historical figures who are characters, most of them played by famous people. Those are really the only additions I would make right now. Um, but I will hijack your episode one more time to say I did wanna compare because, people have asked us to compare this to National Treasure, and part of the reason for that, I think, is that Night at the Museum is a Disney movie,
Mhm.
and it was released in 2006, so that is smack in between the release of National Treasure and Book of Secrets. So right off the bat, I kind of feel like Disney felt like they had something here with the success of National Treasure, this, like, historical fiction. And did that play a role in Night at the Museum coming to be?
I mean, I think it had to be completely honest, um, because obviously the book existed,
Sure.
right? But they didn't have to make this film.
Right.
And so they definitely, I think, were working off of National Treasure's success. But I think what'll become interesting, and I'll be interested to hear your take on it too, Aubrey, as we kind of go through this episode. This film is very different from
Yes.
National Treasure. I would say
Mhm.
more different than similar, and
I would
honestly,
agree.
more different than like some of the other films that we've tried to compare National Treasure to. So it's almost like Disney was like, "We should do National Treasure, but different?"
In multiple ways, right? Like, the structure, the more for kids, the supernatural, I just think when we start talking about all the historical figures that they incorporate into this movie, it was much more of a light touch, so it's like, let's
Hmm,
name drop these figures and not really use the history as much. We'll get to that, but I agree. I kind of think they were like, "Oh, what made National Treasure work? We talked about George Washington? Okay, now let's talk about Teddy Roosevelt. What's better than
right.
talking about Teddy Roosevelt? Having Teddy Roosevelt." You know what I mean? Like,
But not actually.
yeah, it's weird.
We'll get there.
Yeah. Okay.
So, anyway, that's why I kinda thought it would be interesting to look at this through the lens of, like, how can we national treasure this movie, right? Because that feels kind of like what they tried to do.
Yeah,
So,
fair.
let's start with the history aspect of this, and, I mean, I guess before we even go into that, we need to talk about what you've already mentioned, which is the whole, like, mythical, magical,
Yeah.
supernatural element. I I knew it was gonna happen.
Yeah.
because obviously the characters come to life. But I'm assuming you had feelings.
I did. I mean, to me, the supernatural element is obviously the biggest difference. I say it on every comparison that has a supernatural element. That is the biggest difference between National Treasure and this movie. Oddly, it doesn't bother me here, and I think it's because this is such a different movie from National Treasure,
Mm,
like, it does not purport to me, the big difference is, like, this okay, let's compare this to was it Fountain of Youth, the Apple TV Plus, where it's like Apple TV Plus Fountain of Youth that we covered last year in 2025. The whole first 3 quarters of the movie was history, 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 and then you get to the last 25% and it's like, "Surprise! Supernatural the whole time," right? Like,
true.
that was horrifying to me because it was pretending to be one thing and then pulled the rug out from under you. This one never purports to be anything but. Do you know what I mean? So it's automatically different.
I do, and that's a really good point, um, because it's almost like I don't wanna say that, like, the bar is lowered because it lowered sounds mean.
No, I know what you
It
mean.
it the bar is it's different
Yes.
because we're going into it like there's a very comedic element from the beginning, which we'll talk about more too,
Right.
but I think that lends itself to this supernatural component.
I agree. I also think and, like, if this was I'll probably say this multiple times in this episode. If this was Night at the Museum Hunt, the podcast, you know we would be looking up whether this, like, life force lore, this idea of an Egyptian tablet having these supernatural properties, we would be looking up whether that was associated with a real Egyptian legend, and I don't know. This is not Night
Right.
at the Museum Hunt, so we did not look into that. What I will say is if that is based on any actual Egyptian mythology, that would be seriously interesting to me, especially on that history to supernatural spectrum that we defined for Percy Jackson, right?
Mm,
Where it's mythology versus history coded. Like, where does mythology associated with like a society's religion fall on the history spectrum? I would
yeah.
genuinely be curious about that.
I would too. There were a couple points in this film where I was like, if true,
Mhm.
cool, but
Right.
obviously did not have time to look into it. But I think the use of the Egyptian element here,
Yeah.
for better or worse, kind of plays into this idea that there could be some mythical supernatural thing going on, which honestly to me kind of makes it feel like it could be believable.
Sure. Yeah.
It could be a
I
real
don't doubt that.
thing. So the next thing I kinda wanna talk about now that we got kind of that out of the way is how history is used in Night at the Museum, because we are still there's a supernatural element here, but
Mhm.
we're in a museum that's full of history,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And it was different. Mm, it was not I wanna say it was not heavy-handed with the history, but it also kind of was because it to me, it felt like they were just throwing characters and even, like, phrases and quotes at
Yeah.
us and expecting us to be like, "Oh, cool, that counts."
It was a little Edge of History, wasn't it? Like, do you know what I mean? So do you remember in Edge of History, I think it was episode 1 when Jess is interacting with Sadusky for, like, one of the first times, he went on a diatribe where he was like, you know, "The Aztecs gave us tomatoes and potatoes," like, that whole thing,
Mhm.
and they did it that way to like, make the dementia argument believable, but we commented on the at the time that it also felt like they were using that as history filler. Like,
Mhm.
history wasn't plot, it was filler,
Like
and there was a
shoehorn.
exactly. It was like, we're a history show, let me prove it to you, here are some facts, bam, 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 in no way that actually matters. Like, you could cut out that Sadusky quote, and the show would still work like, it would still make sense.
Mhm.
We saw that in this movie as well. Did you, I think it was the Teddy Roosevelt character, he was like it had to be, he said, "I didn't build the Panama Canal in one day." Right? It's like saying Rome wasn't built in a day, but they're gonna make it history, and I know, it's supposed to be funny because 'cause they're
Mhm.
co-opting, like, a phrase, but to me, that's illustrative of how Night at the Museum uses history.
Yeah, and I think it's also I totally agree with that. I think one of the I don't wanna say turnoffs for me, but yeah, no, I'll say turnoffs for me was the pure number of historical figures that were represented in
Hmm,
this film, which it seems like it would be a good thing because it's like
yeah,
there's a lot of history there. But because there were so many people, I mean, we have like I mean, you mentioned we have Teddy Roosevelt, we have Sacagawea, we have like Attila the Hun, we have the whole like Roman mini soldier thing going on.
mhm.
We got Owen Wilson's cowboy character. There
Wild
are
West.
yeah, there are so many different pieces to this that I don't feel like I was able to get a clear representation of any one time point in history or and get to know any character well.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because we were able to kind of see how all of these different historical figures and time periods would like interact, but even that didn't feel fleshed out.
I agree. I see huge pros and cons to this approach, and I see huge differences from National Treasure, right? Because National Treasure says, all right, first movie, Revolutionary War, second movie, Civil War. And if we're going to throw in something else, it's going to be the backstory. It's going to be the Knights Templar, it's going to be indigenous, you know, civilizations in Mesoamerica. It's discreet, and that allows us to actually dive into the history associated. When you throw in all these time periods, you cannot integrate their history effectively because you don't have enough time.
Mhm.
That to me is the con and the way it's different from National Treasure. The pro, if I'm thinking from a movie production standpoint, is it's a catch-all so that if you have a particular time period you're interested in as the viewer, there's something for you, whether you're interested in the Roman Empire or the Lewis and Clark expedition or anything in between.
That is true, and they do talk about all of them a little bit.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, so, like, you do get to see it.
Teeny weeny bit. Yep.
It's not great. I will say the one thing that I was really interested in was, Teddy Roosevelt and Sacagawea.
Oh, thank you for saying that. Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
this to me and I did mean to look into it, I didn't, but this to me was one of those things where I was like, "Could this have been true?"
They were not contemporaneous.
So that was then the thought that I had,
Okay.
and the concern that I had after having that thought because I was like, "Oh, well, I'm dumb."
Okay, but first, for those who haven't watched Night at the Museum or if it's been a while, in this movie, the characters or the figures of Teddy Roosevelt and Sacagawea sort of have a thing for each other. At first, it's kind of one-sided, like Teddy has been pining after Sacagawea. It seems like for a long time, like every night these characters wake up and he sees her through the glass and he's like, "Oh, her." And but then once this movie happens, like the glass is broken and whatever, they get to actually interact. They're sort of a weird couple. I I will say that Teddy's infatuation with Sacagawea is like a twist on history that National Treasure would never do, which is interesting to say because National Treasure loves to twist history.
They do, but they like to fill in blanks.
They like to fill in blanks. They don't ever take, like, they don't ever twist history in a way that actively contradicts history. Do you know?
So, question, and you might not know the answer to this, but this is something that, I'm wondering. Do you think that there is any indication of Teddy Roosevelt having been aware or, like, interested in the
Uh,
Lewis and Clark expedition and Sacagawea, and, I mean, I get that it would be a stretch to say that he was, like, romanticizing her,
sure.
but if that was a link, we could potentially maybe that would be how they could national treasure it, but I agree that it's still, like, it would not happen.
That's a really good point and a really good question. I don't know the answer off the top of my head, so what I'm saying is pure speculation. I do suspect this is very Googleable, though. I would estimate, yes, very much so, because Teddy Roosevelt is the president who is, like, responsible for the national parks and,
Right.
like, really into the natural world and the environment. Come to DC, visit Teddy Roosevelt Island. That's his monument is Teddy Roosevelt Island, like, and it's just a park that you can walk around. So that I had not thought of, and that's a really good connection. I maybe that's why they did it.
Maybe. I mean, let's at least say that's why. Okay?
Okay, I'm down with that.
Okay, so let's move into characters because we have a lot of them, but I don't know about you. I found it a little hard to map them onto our
National
national treasure
treasure.
characters.
I mean, Larry is Ben, right?
Yeah. But he's also comedic.
And and not a good person. Like, I don't know, like, I
Okay, I take offense to that when it comes to thinking about Riley. He doesn't know history, though. He very clearly he goes into this job and, like, that's a big part of his storyline, right? Is he just doesn't know
Yeah.
anything about the exhibit, so he doesn't really know how to handle the fact that everyone comes to life, which feels very Riley to me.
You know, maybe he's a really good Ben Riley mix now that you say that, because I would say that the biggest difference to me between Ben and Larry is just Larry being super unserious. That was the whole beginning of the movie where he can't hold down a job and, like, all this kinda stuff. So, like, the unseriousness combined with the not knowing history does feel kind of Riley-esque. However, on the Ben side, I think there are also a lot of parallels. So, when Larry is pushing back on Nick, his son, when Nick is telling him, "Oh, yeah, I wanna be a hockey player, but my fallback career is this." And Larry's like, "No, your dream is to play in the NHL. You'll do that. That's your dream." So, like, Larry is an idealist, he's a dreamer, and to me, that is Ben, who insists on the Templar treasure being real because it has to be, because it's what he grew up believing, you know?
Mm, that's very true. What did you think about the relationship, though, that
Yeah.
Larry had with Nikki or Nick? Because that, to me, it was interesting because at first I wanted to say, like, "Oh, this is clearly, like, a Patrick Ben type
Mhm.
of
But
parallel,"
reverse.
but it really feels like Nick is pulling for Larry. Like, he really, really wants him to, like, get it together. He felt like more adult than he should have needed to.
Yeah. To me, this is a Ben Patrick relationship where Nikki is Patrick, so it's, like,
Mm,
reversed, and it's sort of like the beginning of the Ben Patrick relationship in National Treasure plus the National Treasure 2 relationship. That's, like, where he's really on board, right, when Nikki really gets on board. So, like, there's this moment where, before I wanna say Ben, because 'cause I'm thinking Ben Stiller. Larry, there's a moment when Larry hasn't secured the night watch job yet, and Nick says to him, "Well, what if you're just an ordinary guy who should get a job?" And I was like, "This is Patrick's perspective on Ben and the past Gates family members." Remember Patrick's whole spiel about, like, "Yeah, I'm the family kook. I have a job with health insurance."
yeah, and
And
I will say that to me, it feels we don't really get to see this, but it's pretty apparent that, Larry has been struggling to get a real job for a while,
Mhm.
and I feel like Nick probably at many points in his life really believed his dad, really believed that, like, what he was saying and what he was doing and all of his, like, get rich quick schemes were true,
Mhm.
and he kinda stopped believing,
Mhm.
and then we get to kinda see at the end of the film-ish, when Larry brings Nick to work, that he needs the physical demonstration, like, he needs to see it with his own eyes, which is kind of what
Mhm.
Patrick needed.
Sure. Yeah, I believe that. And by the last half hour, I know we'll talk about pacing shortly, Night at the Museum does become a father-son quest, much like
Mhm.
it takes Patrick some time to come around, but especially if you consider National Treasure both movies as a unit, by the end, Patrick is fully part of the father-son quest, especially if you're thinking about National Treasure too. Um, so yeah, I really see that Patrick Ben dynamic in Nick and Larry.
Definitely. So, I mean, if we're thinking Abigail, it's
Mhm.
gotta be the Rebecca of it all, right?
Yeah, I mean, Rebecca's super Abigail coded.
Love
She
interest.
love interest, but she's also the movie's history expert. Like,
She
Larry
is.
goes to her when he's trying to understand Sacagawea because, he can't when she and everyone else first comes alive. Um, and Rebecca's sort of coerced into helping Larry, much like Abigail is initially kind of kidnapped, stolen, forced into helping Ben. Um, and Abigail has a doctorate, Rebecca is pursuing her doctorate. She just happens to focus on Sacagawea, whereas now I'm pretty sure Abigail, studied, George Washington given her shrine that we discussed in our last episode.
Yeah. I mean, 100% Abigail studied George Washington, there is no doubt about that. I I wanna tell you about a little side, uh, like, side hustle, side run, I don't know. I got sidetracked when I was watching this film.
Oh, okay.
Um, and it was by the Wild Wild West and Owen Wilson.
Okay.
So, Owen Wilson, for those who don't know, pops up kinda partway through the film. He's not I would not say he's a main character in any way. Um, he is a mini figurine
Mhm.
who is a cowboy. He has it out with, like, the Roman soldiers. It's a whole thing. I then remembered upon seeing Owen Wilson that I had seen this film before and
It
not
took you
really
that I'm
paid.
sorry. It took you that long?
Yes.
Wow.
Mhm. Um, and not really paid that much attention to it the first time, apparently. And then I was like, "I remember Owen Wilson being, like, a bigger part of this than he is." I looked it up. He was uncredited in these films
No.
because his character it was meant to be not like an Easter egg, but kind of like an Easter egg. Like, he was just kinda supposed to pop up for a second. Like, he wasn't Robin Williams, right? He wasn't playing Teddy Roosevelt. He was popping up for a second, gonna do his little, like, Owen Wilson voice for the
Mhm.
cowboy thing, and then be done with it. But apparently, like, test audiences really liked him, and so they
Ah.
added they, like, expanded on his character a little bit, but because of the way the contracts worked, he was still uncredited. So, like, if you go into the IMDb page, like, and look at Owen Wilson's face in the little thing, underneath of it, it says, like, or I think his name is Jed, I don't know, I'm making that up, slash uncredited. Like, his name is not in the credits, and I'm pretty sure he's in the other films.
He is, yeah.
I do not think he is credited.
That is so interesting. Kinda makes me like him a lot that he would come back
He
to be
might be,
and be
I don't know,
uncredited.
but
Re
Riley is
Yeah.
is where I got to from this because he's comedic.
Mhm.
just like Riley, and this is a little more meta, but the fact that the test audiences liked him,
Yeah.
and then the writers were like, "Oh, okay, we should put more of him in," that is very Riley coded.
Yeah, I mean, the Owen Wilson character, I think his name was Jedediah.
Jedediah. I
Um,
was kinda right.
you were. Um, he and his little, like, bromance, love-hate relationship with Octavius, the Roman emperor, was definitely, like, just comic relief added in. Those characters were not necessary. Everything that they did could have been accomplished in other ways in the movie, so, like, that gives me Riley vibes as well, and it gets back to what you were saying early on, I think in the summary of the movie, which is that this is just a comedic movie. It's far more comedic than National Treasure, and it actually made me really curious as to what this movie would have looked like if Larry was played by Nicolas Cage or if, like, Ben Gates was played by Ben Stiller, and how different the movies become based on who plays those characters.
I think Ben Stiller might have had a hard time pulling off Nick Cage.
Ben. Yeah.
Or not Nick Cage, Ben Gates.
Yeah.
I think Nick Cage could have played this movie in a comedic way. It just would have been a different kind of comedic, but he would not have been Ben Gates in this. Like, he
No,
definitely would have played it for comedy.
I think he could have been like Cage Rage, Ben Gates on
Mhm.
the stairwell haggising
Yeah.
this for sure. But, I do think that there's a lot of heart in both of these characters ultimately, right? Or all of these characters. The museum ends up giving Larry purpose. The treasure hunt gave Ben Gates purpose, right? We see this incredible enlightening moment where Larry, after his first night, confronts the old night guards about what happened at the museum. Oh, hey guys, everything came to life. The heck, right? Or even just Teddy explaining everything about how everything works in the museum to Larry. It really reminds me of Abigail learning the truth of what's on the back of the Declaration, right? There's this huge reluctance to see what he's seeing, and then finally seeing it before his very eyes, just his world is shattered and rebuilt, and I think that adds a lot of heart to both of these movies,
Mm.
that makes them gives them a new parallel that I hadn't thought of before.
Aubrey, that's beautiful.
You like that? Well, then how about, Larry explaining to Rebecca how things come to life at the museum? That's very similar to Ben explaining what's on the back of the Declaration to Abigail in her office, right? Like, Rebecca ain't having it. She's like, it's almost like
No.
she wants to say, "Did Bigfoot take it?" You know?
And could have, but, like, different, there were cavemen. Bigfoot's not a caveman, but,
But before we move on to whatever next section you wanna talk about, I did wanna get back really quickly to the concept that you alluded to again in the summary, which is, like, the stacked cast.
oh my gosh.
Is this really, in a way, reminded me of the Percy Jackson movie. Do you remember how, like, a good chunk of the main characters were actor nobodies, if we're gonna be crass, but then, like, a lot of the side people were very famous, and it was a kids movie? Like, that's again
I I literally, when I was watching this, I was like, I feel like I should have been much more aware of this movie as a child, given all of the people that are in it that I like.
To be fair, I think you're a bit of an anomaly. I think people in our generation definitely knew about this movie, didn't necessarily love it, but, like, I think this was a pretty popular and pretty famous movie. So, like, I'd love for folks to weigh in, please let us know. Um, but just for reference, this cast included Ben Stiller, Dick Van Dyke, Robin Williams, Owen Wilson, Ricky Gervais, Paul Rudd, and many others that I could name drop, but, like, their parts were smaller and smaller. What
Rami Malek,
This was, like, his origin story, I swear to you.
every scene, there was, like, a new actor
Yeah,
that I was just like,
yeah.
"Okay, I know you."
To me, this cast list, I could be overanalyzing here, but to me, this is indicative of, like, the perceived or potential success of these sorts of historical fiction franchises. right? Like, how do you get Dick Van Dyke to agree to be a villain in this kids movie? To me, it's like, do you show him National Treasure and be like, "This is gonna be the next National Treasure. You wanna be a part of it."
Or do you say, like, you wanna Mary Poppins it up again and just be super goofy? Here you go. Like,
Sure, sure.
it was I don't know, it was really cool to see all of these people, and I was really happy that they clearly wanted to be part of this.
Yes. Mhm.
It gives me hope for maybe getting some big names in National Treasure. Honestly, it kinda reminded me of, like, Helen Mirren doing
Yeah.
National Treasure too. Like, what is Helen Mirren doing there? We've said this before.
Yeah, yeah. Touche.
Okay. So I want to move on to the structure slash like pacing of
Mhm.
this film because we talk about how National Treasure is has very interesting, very different type of pacing than most like treasure hunt actiony type movies. And in many respects, so does Night at the Museum.
I'm so glad you agree because yes. The yes, this was a short movie. It was so much shorter than National Treasure, somehow felt just as long, if not longer, by the way.
Mhm.
There's a lot of weird pacing here, but sorry, I digress. Yeah, let's let you go.
No, no, no. I mean, I think the two things that stand out for me, and maybe we can dissect these a little bit, are the fact that, like, to me, what feels like very much the climax of the film, which I don't think it was, but it felt like that to me, was the first night that Larry was dealing with the museum by himself. Like, that's kind of, if you're going to remember this movie,
Yeah.
I feel like that is the scene that you remember. And that happens fairly early in the film. And then, in complete contrast to that, I remember we were getting toward the ends of the film. I was watching this with Josh, and I was like, Josh, who are the bad guys? Like, what? And he was just like, Emily, just wait, because he had seen the movie. But I was like, we need to be wrapping this up
Yeah.
here.
So, I will add to this and say, while yes, his first night managing the museum happens fairly early in the movie, it did take a really long time for him to even get to the museum, in my
That's
opinion.
true.
Like, whatever. Where to begin? Yes. The key to me, the key montage in Night at the Museum, if we're gonna keep doing National Treasure comparisons. At Night at the Museum, the key montage is Larry not just being at the museum that night himself, but how he then chooses to manage each of the exhibits in his own way. Because, right, the actual first night, he loses the instruction manual. So then, and there's no other copy. So he now needs to figure out a way to manage things on his own. And so it's really the second night that comes to mind for me for the montage, where he uses trickery to control everything around him. I'll give examples. There's the Easter Island statues, right? And for some reason, they want bubble gum, right? So he gives them gum. And then the Neanderthal exhibit, like, they are trying to make fire. So he gives them a lighter. And right, like, there's all these things that the characters are the historical characters are trying to do. He just lets them do it,
Hmm.
basically. And what happens? The Easter Island statue gets a giant bubble stuck to its face. It's a problem. The Neanderthals light themselves and their whole exhibit on fire. They need to use a fire extinguisher to get it out, and they start eating the fire extinguisher dispense stuff. And basically, we see that Larry doing it his way was the lazy or easy way out, just like give them what they want. It didn't work. And it didn't
Hmm.
work because he wasn't using history. So his solutions were ineffective. And so, to me, if I'm going to totally national treasure hunt this and assign value to this creative choice, is this sending a message to the viewer about the value of history or about studying history? Because as soon as he starts understanding the characters in terms of who they were as people in the past, he can change the solutions and now everyone gets along. He uses history to inform the present.
Mm, I like that a lot. I I do like that kind of message that it it sends,
Mhm. Well,
to
if you think of it this way, I don't think anyone's thinking of it this way.
I don't think so either. I actually I was actually thinking of it from the perspective of, well, he can kinda get away with just giving them what they're all trying for the first night because they're not real. So, like, he's not affecting the time course of history.
No, they're not real, but then they also are real, right? Like, there was this really strange moment where Teddy Roosevelt this is what one of the things that bugged me about the movie, and I'm getting a little off track here, but there's this moment where Teddy Roosevelt breaks kind of the fourth wall and says, "But what do I know? I am just a statue that was made in a factory in Poughkeepsie." And I was like, "That's funny, but it doesn't jive with the rest of your character in the movie when you're literally saying Teddy Roosevelt quotes and purporting to be him." It just I found that very confusing, and I just wish it would have picked one way, like the movie would have picked one direction or another. Either this is Teddy Roosevelt or like Teddy Roosevelt's soul or spirit or whatever, or it's just a random dude dressed up as Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
I think I kind of took that as a suggestion that none of them are obviously, like, the real people, but that they have all learned, or many of them have, like, somehow gotten, like, a knowledge download about the part they're playing, except for Rami Malek, because he was actually, like, entombed and, you know,
Well,
mm,
that's just it, right? Like, it's so weird. It's like, okay, if you're all just dummies, like literal dummies, um, made in Poughkeepsie, but they all speak their native languages. But I did think it was funny that the movie was self-aware enough to give a reason for Rami Malek speaking English. So
that
it's
was nice.
like, so I don't know. It just in my brain, I'm seeing this as too many puzzle pieces that don't all quite fit together.
Yeah, I think it's one of those you think too hard about it and it falls apart. It's better to
Quickly,
just
yeah,
leave it as, like, a comedic
yeah,
romp, which is different from National Treasure because we have
very
thought too
much.
hard about National Treasure, and it doesn't fall apart that easily.
Correct. But I'm sorry I got us off on that tangent. The other, like, structural thing and pacing thing you wanted to talk about was the villain, and I think that's really important to talk about. I think what we're working with in Night at the Museum is the concept of a decoy villain.
Yeah.
You're supposed to think Ricky Gervais I think you're supposed to think that Ricky Gervais, who is, like, the executive director of the museum, is the bad guy because he's very abrasive. He's constantly threatening to get rid of Larry. Um, it's there's no actual villain until there's literally 30 minutes left, and that's when, spoiler alert, the reveal is that the old night guards are actually the villains. They're trying to steal the tablet, the Egyptian tablet that makes everything come to life, and I think they're trying to steal artifacts as well, like, to sell, right?
I'm gonna be honest, their motive was a bit of a mystery to me. Um, I was just kind of like, "Oh, cool, Dick Van Dyke's playing a villain." Um, it was it was weird to me because honestly, I didn't think that Ricky Gervais was the villain for the first part of the film. I thought either there was no villain or, like, the main conflict was what Larry had going on with all of the, um, like, statues and whatnot that were coming to life in the museum, like,
Hmm.
or that the monkey was the villain. I knew the monkey wasn't the villain, but it, like, to me, just kind of felt like that, and I think it was just because it was a little too clunky in the beginning, the way that the night guards handed everything off
Mhm.
to Larry, where, like, maybe I should have been able to be like, "Oh, they're the bad guys." But
Yeah.
it was like, when you think about the way Ian or even Mitch, who you know how I feel about Mitch, like, how their stories are incorporated with Ben's story, Mitch at
Right.
least has, like, a reason. It's not great, but he has a reason for what he's doing. It's
Very
pretty clear
much.
from the beginning.
Yep.
These guys are just, like, effing around and finding out.
So, I will say, to me, it was very clear that these guys were gonna be villains because there was that really weird moment where, like, one of them tries to stay behind to, like, be sentimental in the locker room, and I'm like,
Mhm.
"Okay, obviously." As a kid, I never would have picked up on that. But then that was, like, within the first 20 minutes, and then it's not until 30 minutes left of the movie that they really become villains, which leads me to the biggest problem with comparing these movies is the treasure hunt, right? National Treasure is a treasure hunt. The hunt, if you're going to say there's a hunt in Night at the Museum, happens at the end when the old night guards do steal the tablet and Larry and Nikki and the historical figures have to get it back before the sun goes up, and then, like, then they would all, freeze literally like a stone kind of, or dissolve if they're outside of the whatever, not important. It would ruin everything. Um,
That's
so
interesting to me.
what is interesting to you?
That is the hunt you picked up on. I totally think it's valid, like, I totally see it. That is not the hunt I thought was there, but what you're saying makes sense.
Okay, I'm gonna do mine, and then I really wanna hear yours because I cannot think of a literal other hunt in this movie. Um, but t it's weird because to me, this was the only clear analogy of a treasure hunt, but is it a treasure hunt, right? Like, there's a treasure, the tablet, and each person on the quote unquote "team" has a role, and, like, there's planning involved, there's a sequential order of operations of how they're gonna like, someone's gonna block this entrance, and then, Larry's gonna go this way, and then the little figurine dudes are gonna go in the little toy car to, like, whatever, I don't know, there was a whole stepwise process. So there was a hunt. Does there need to be a heist for it to be a treasure hunt, though? And does there need to be clues or puzzles for it to be a treasure hunt? I think you don't need a heist to have a treasure hunt, but you do need clues or puzzles. So in the end, this is not a real treasure hunt. What do you
Hmm.
think?
I From the past conversations we have had about this, can understand where you're coming from with that.
Mhm.
I think that I have been on this journey of discovery, um, where I am redefining for myself what a treasure hunt is, in a very, like, CIE type manner. And so, to me, I think, like, your classic treasure hunt, sure, there should be clues, there should be puzzles, stuff like that. But I will make the argument that I actually perceived the treasure hunt as being Larry figuring out how to manage all of these different historical
Uh,
figures. And you say there need to be clues, there need to be puzzles, that kind of thing. The puzzles that he had to figure out were what they wanted, and then he had to use history books to figure out how to get that for them in a way that was congruent with, like, not just handing them a lighter as cavemen. And so to me, that felt like, I think, enough of a puzzle, or at least of having to, like, do research and put the pieces together, that was the hunt for me. I can see by your face that you don't agree, which is fine.
no, no, it's not that I don't agree. It's just that I don't buy into the what I'm gonna call the umbrella of, like, the treasure were the friends we made along the way, like, if you consider those sort of ethereal, big picture things treasures, then I agree with you. That's just not my personal conception of, like, for a movie, what a treasure hunt is. But yeah, I mean, but that gets I think is the last section you wanted to talk about, like, the messages purported by these movies? Because I
Yes.
think I think that what you said does lead into some of the messaging about the value of history. Would you agree?
100%. I think that like, if you don't know about history and you're learning about
Mhm.
history, even if it's because you're forced to for a night watch museum job, like, there is value in that, and
Yeah,
I think that is very clearly, as you even said earlier, right, that's what Larry needs to do, so that kind of has to be one of the main messages that is being purported
right.
by this film, which National Treasure doesn't necessarily say, like, you need to know your history, but it does kind of tell you that you need to have a reverence for history.
And it makes you care about and kind of revere the hero who is a history buff,
Mhm,
right? We've talked about how we all want to be Ben in some ways in terms of like our morals and our values. But yes, once Larry finally understands or even cares about history in this movie, he can now succeed in his quest. And we see this very tangibly at the end because when he is chasing Dick Van Dyke's character, who is like Dick Van Dyke's character has, like, co-opted, these money carrier horses who came to life at the museum, right? He's co-opted them and is, like, riding them through probably, like, Central Park or something, and so Larry has studied history now, and so he knows that money carrier horses stop when they hear the word Dakota, right? So he says Dakota, the horses stop, and he won, right? He got the tablet back. So we do see another Ben Larry parallel there in that the person who knows the history is going to be the victor. They are going
mhm,
to get what they seek. There's also, sort of from a history and society perspective, a concept of commonality and unity that Night at the Museum, I will not say it was like a theme. It was sort of a one off, but it did
mhm,
come up. And this was when Larry is trying to rally the troops, literally and figuratively, trying to get all the characters at the museum to help him retrieve the tablet, even though they all are different people from different time periods with different goals. He says, quote, "Civil War dudes, your brothers." So this is part of an exhibit where there were Union and Confederate soldiers that were battling each other. So he says, "Civil War dudes, you're brothers." And then he tells Octavius and Jedediah, again, this is the Roman guy and the Wild West guy, who have been just like funnily battling each other for no real reason the whole movie. He tells them that they both just want the best for their people. So everyone in this museum, you all just need to work together to find the tablet to ensure the good of not just yourselves, but each other. And this feels like a very National Treasure analogous message to me.
100%. I also noted when he said, like, to the Civil War, mm, soldiers that, like, they were, quote, unquote, like, "brothers," because to me, I was just like, he's literally just, like, solving the issue right there.
Yeah.
If only that's what we did in life.
um Of course, National Treasure puts this sort of messaging front and center, right? It becomes the theme of the movie. This is just like a side quest, if you will. Um,
Much like Owen Wilson was a side quest for myself.
for you. Exactly. The last thing I really wanted to bring up, and I hope this is near the end of our discussion because I think it's a really great kind of meta point. The Night at the Museum movie itself shows how these historical figures coming to life and then that becoming known, right, publicly, actually ended up saving the museum, the American Museum of Natural History in New York, because at the beginning of the movie, we learn that the museum was going under because of low attendance. And so once this comes out that this is this living history museum, people are flocking to the museum. The museum is saved. I think this is a really meta comparison to what happened for National Treasures featured museums in real life. So, like, we didn't see Nara being saved by National Treasure, right? Or the Declaration message in the movie, but we know that in real life, way more people visit the National Archives now because of it. I do wonder if Night at the Museum has a similar effect on the American Museum of Natural History. Like, do people go there because of this movie?
I would have to say yes.
Yeah,
Like,
probably.
I don't think they're expecting anything to come to life, but I mean, you want to see kind of the
Yeah.
exhibits and stuff. So I would say 100% it had to have done that, which is really cool. And honestly, like if we're gonna wrap this little section up, a great kind of commonality with National Treasure.
Yeah. Okay, so for our wrap up, I want to do something new, Emily, and I want this to be like a new thing that we do. I'd really like to give our listeners a something to think about, kind of like we do with our read along, our book club on Patreon, where like we have questions that we want our fellow readers to consider. I want to have a question at the end of episodes that we pose to our listeners so that they can, if they want to interact with us on social media but don't know what to say, they can respond to this question. Um, so what I'm putting you on the spot here a little bit as the leader of this episode. What would you like to know from our listeners based on what we talked about today?
I think for me, I would really be interested in hearing because our listeners were the ones that wanted us to do this episode, do this comparison, what they would interpret as the treasure hunt in this film,
Hmm.
and whether or not there needs to be a treasure hunt for us to be able to compare the
Ooh.
film to National Treasure, because it's something that I feel like comes up a lot in the kind of comparisons that we do on these
Mhm.
episodes. Um, so yeah,
And I want to know from you guys, should we do a comparison in the future between National Treasure and Night at the Museum 2? Because that one takes place at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C.
exciting.
Let
Please
us
go
know.
ahead and let us know. Yeah, you can find us on social media on both X and Instagram at NT Hunt Podcast, our website, nthuntpodcast.com. Please leave us a rating and review on wherever you are listening to your podcasts. And please, please, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Even if you're not watching over there, if you're still an audio only person, subscribe to it. It helps us out a ton, and we really hope to hear from you on any and all of these platforms.
Next up, you guys, here on National Treasure Hunt, you will be, I guess, hearing another episode that y'all have kind of contributed to in a way. Because in episode 114 of our show, we're going to be building a National Treasure inspired playlist. We're going to be pitching some songs, and y'all are going to be pitching some songs. So, those of you on social media who responded to a prompt on our Instagram a little while back, you're about to have your little moment in the spotlight. But until then, I'm Aubrey,
And I'm Emily.
and thank you so much for joining us on our National Treasure Hunt.